A poor 6-year-old girl asks a paralyzed millionaire if he'll trade his leftovers for a miracle. "I can make you walk again," she says. He laughed, but everything changed. "Just before we start, I'm curious. What time is it where you are? Day or night? I'm grateful you're here." The December snow fell softly outside the grand windows of Harrison Manor, but inside the luxurious dining room, Robert Harrison sat alone at a table that could seat 20. His expensive wheelchair made no sound as he moved closer to the window, watching the world beyond his prison of glass and steel. At 52, Bob had everything money could buy, except the one thing he wanted most, the ability to walk. 20 years had passed since the car accident that stole his legs. 20 years of the finest medical care, experimental treatments, and false hopes. His fortune of $40 million meant nothing when he couldn't even feel his own feet. The mansion echoed with emptiness. His wife had left him 15 years ago, unable to handle his bitterness. His friends had slowly drifted away, tired of his angry outbursts and dark moods. Even his mother, Eleanor, visited less frequently now, her 78-year-old heart breaking each time she saw her son's hollow eyes. Bob pushed away his barely touched dinner and wheeled himself to the study. Outside, through the frosted glass, he could see the shapes of people hurrying past on the sidewalk below. Normal people. Walking people. People who took their legs for granted every single day. A soft knock at the servants' entrance caught his attention. Who would be visiting on such a cold December evening? The housekeeper had left hours ago, and Bob wasn't expecting anyone. The knocking continued, gentle but persistent. Curiosity overcame his usual desire for solitude. He wheeled himself through the house, past portraits of ancestors who could all walk, past furniture arranged for someone who would never stand again. The knocking had stopped, but he opened the heavy door anyway. There, huddled against the cold, stood the smallest person he'd ever seen at his door. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that had seen better days. Her shoes had holes in them, and her thin jacket was nowhere near warm enough for December in Massachusetts. "Mister," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm really hungry. Do you have any food you're not going to eat?" Bob stared at her in shock. In his 20 years of isolation, no one had ever asked him for help. People usually wanted something from his money, his connections, his influence. But this tiny girl was asking for his leftovers. "What are you doing out here alone?" he asked, his voice rusty from disuse. "I live with my mama in the apartment over there." She pointed to a rundown building across the street. "She's working late again, and I got hungry, Mrs. Patterson next door said rich people throw away good food all the time." The girl's eyes were the brightest blue he'd ever seen, and they held no fear, no judgment about his wheelchair. She looked at him like he was just another person, not a broken millionaire. "What's your name?" Bob found himself asking. "Lily Thompson. What's yours?" "Andrew Robert Harrison, but you can call me Bob." Lily smiled, and for the first time in years, Bob felt something stir in his chest, something he'd thought was dead forever. "I can make you a deal, Mr. Bob," Lily said, stepping closer. "You give me some of that food you didn't eat, and I'll give you something even better." Bob almost smiled. "What could you possibly give me, little one?" Lily looked directly into his eyes, her small hand reaching out to touch the armrest of his wheelchair. "I can make you walk again." The words hit Bob like a physical blow. For a moment, the old rage rose in his throat. How dare this child mock him with impossible promises? He'd heard it all before, from doctors, faith healers, experimental researchers. They all promised miracles, and they all took his money and left him exactly where he started. But something in Lily's voice stopped him from slamming the door. There was no greed there, no calculation, just absolute certainty. As if she'd stated that the sky was blue or that snow was cold. Bob found himself laughing, the sound strange and hollow in the night air. "You think you can make me walk?" "I know I can," Lily said simply. "I've done it before." The next morning, Bob woke with Lily's words still echoing in his mind. "I can make you walk again." He'd given her a container full of his untouched dinner and watched her disappear into the night, promising to return the next day. Now, as his housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, prepared his usual breakfast that he wouldn't eat, Bob found himself actually looking forward to something for the first time in decades. "Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Chen said carefully, "there's a little girl at the door asking for you." Bob's heart actually skipped a beat. "Send her in." Lily appeared in the dining room doorway, still wearing the same worn clothes, but somehow looking brighter in the morning light. She carried a small paper bag in her hands. "Good morning, Mr. Bob," she said cheerfully. "I brought you something." "You brought me something." Bob couldn't hide his surprise. In his experience, people took from him. They didn't give. Lily nodded and pulled a crumpled flower from her bag. It was clearly picked from someone's garden, slightly wilted, but she offered it to him like it was made of gold. "My mama says when someone's nice to you, you should be nice back. This is for giving me dinner." Bob took the flower with hands that hadn't held a gift in years. "Thank you, Lily. That's very thoughtful." "Can I see your legs?" Lily asked suddenly. The question would have sent Bob into a rage if it came from anyone else. But from this innocent child, it seemed like simple curiosity. "They don't work," Bob said carefully. "I can't feel them at all. Can I touch them?" Bob hesitated. Even his doctors approached his legs with clinical detachment. No one had touched them with kindness in 20 years. "I suppose," he said finally. Lily walked over and gently placed her small hands on Bob's knee through his pants. Her touch was warm and soft, and for just a moment, Bob could have sworn he felt something. Not sensation exactly, but presence. "They're sleeping," Lily said matter-of-factly. "Sometimes when things are really, really tired, they sleep for a long time. But they always wake up eventually." "Lily," Bob said gently, "my legs aren't sleeping. They're broken. The doctors say they'll never work again." "Doctors don't know everything," Lily said with the confidence only a 6-year-old could possess. "My mama told me that when I was really little, I couldn't talk for the first 3 years. All the doctors said something was wrong with my brain, but then one day I just started talking, and now I talk all the time." She grinned at him, and Bob found himself almost believing her impossible optimism. "How exactly do you plan to make me walk?" he asked. Lily climbed onto the chair across from him, her legs swinging freely. "First, you have to want to walk for the right reasons." "What do you mean?" "Most people want things for themselves, but that's not how magic works. You have to want to walk so you can help other people." "Magic?" Bob almost laughed again, but there was something in Lily's earnest expression that stopped him. "I've wanted to walk for 20 years, Bob said. "Trust me, I want it badly enough." "But why?" Lily asked. "Why do you want to walk?" The question caught Bob off guard. Why did he want to walk? To be normal again? To get his old life back? To stop feeling broken? "I want to be the person I used to be," he said finally. Lily shook her head. "That's wanting something for yourself. What if you could walk again, but only to help other people? Would you still want it?" Bob stared at this tiny philosopher across from him. When had anyone ever asked him to think about what he could do for others? I don't know," he admitted. "That's okay," Lily said brightly. "We have time to figure it out. Can I come back tomorrow?" "Yes," Bob said without hesitation. "Yes, you can come back." As Lily skipped toward the door, she turned back to him. "Oh, and Mr. Bob, you should eat your breakfast. You're going to need your strength." For the first time in months, Bob actually felt hungry. Margaret Thompson was running late for her second job when she burst through the door of their tiny one-bedroom apartment. At 28, Maggie looked older than her years, worn down by 6 years of single parenthood and working 3 jobs to keep them afloat. "Lily, baby, where are you?" "I'm here, Mama," Lily called from the kitchen. Where she was coloring at their small table, Maggie rushed over and knelt beside her daughter, checking her over with the practiced eye of a mother who'd learned to worry about everything. "Mrs. Patterson said you were gone for hours yesterday. Where did you go?" Lily's crayon paused over her drawing. "I made a new friend." "What kind of friend?" Maggie's voice carried the edge of fear that came with raising a child in a neighborhood where danger lurked around every corner. His name is Mr. Bob, and he lives in the big house across the street. He's in a wheelchair, and he's very sad, but I'm going to help him walk again. Maggie's blood ran cold. A grown man she'd never met, interacting with her 6-year-old daughter. Everything inside her screamed danger. Lily, honey, you can't just go into strangers' houses. It's not safe. But he's not a stranger now. He's my friend. And he gave me dinner when I was hungry. You were hungry? Maggie's heart broke. She'd left crackers and a sandwich for Lily. But it obviously hadn't been enough. It was never enough. Just a little bit, Lily said quickly, sensing her mother's distress. And Mr. Bob has lots of food he doesn't eat. He's really nice, Mama. He let me touch his legs. Every maternal instinct Maggie possessed went into overdrive. He did what? I was checking to see why they don't work. They're just sleeping really deeply, but I can wake them up. Maggie pulled Lily into her arms, holding her tight. Her daughter's innocence was both her greatest gift and Maggie's greatest fear. Lily saw the world as a place where magic was possible, where broken things could be fixed, where everyone was basically good. At 6 years old, she didn't understand the dangers that kept Maggie awake at night. Baby, I need you to promise me something. You can't go to that house anymore, okay? But Mama... No buts, Lily. I know you want to help people, and that's beautiful. But grown-ups who invite little girls into their houses, sometimes they're not good people. Lily's face fell. Mr. Bob is good people, he's just lonely. I'm sure he seems nice, but... A knock at the door interrupted them. Maggie's first instinct was to ignore it. Bill collectors, landlords, and other harbingers of bad news usually knocked at this hour. Mrs. Thompson? A man's voice called. My name is Robert Harrison. I believe your daughter Lily has been visiting me. Maggie's fear spiked. He'd followed Lily home. He knew where they lived. She grabbed the baseball bat she kept by the door and opened it just a crack, the chain still attached. Through the gap, she saw a man in an expensive wheelchair. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, and his eyes held none of the predatory gleam she'd been expecting. Instead, he looked nervous. What do you want? Maggie demanded. I wanted to meet you, Bob said simply. Your daughter has been visiting me, and I thought you should know who she's spending time with. May I come in? Absolutely not. I understand your concern, Bob said calmly. If I had a daughter, I'd be protective too. What if we talked out here? Or better yet, what if you and Lily came to my house? You could see for yourself that I mean no harm. Mama, please, Lily said from behind her. I told you he's nice. Maggie looked down at her daughter's pleading face, then back at the man in the wheelchair. He wasn't what she'd expected. There was something broken about him, something sad and lost that reminded her of herself. 5 minutes, she said finally. And I'm bringing this. She held up the bat. Bob actually smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less from a good mother. As they crossed the street together, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. Harrison Manor up close was even more intimidating than it looked from across the street. Maggie had cleaned houses for wealthy people before, but nothing like this. The foyer alone was bigger than her entire apartment. This is beautiful, she whispered despite herself. It's just a house, Bob said, though Maggie caught the pride in his voice. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be nice, Maggie admitted. She'd been running on 4 hours of sleep and caffeine fumes. While Bob prepared coffee in a kitchen that belonged in a magazine, Lily explored with the fearless curiosity of childhood. She touched expensive vases, examined paintings, and tested the echoes in the high-ceilinged rooms. She's not afraid of anything, Bob observed, watching Lily with something like wonder. That's what scares me, Maggie said. Lily sees the world as this magical place where everything is possible. She doesn't understand that people can hurt her. Has someone hurt her before? The question was asked quietly, but Maggie heard the underlying concern. She found herself looking at this stranger, this wealthy man who had no reason to care about a poor little girl, and seeing genuine worry in his eyes. Her father, Maggie said finally. James had problems, drugs, alcohol, anger. When Lily was 2, I realized she wasn't safe with him around. I left him, but it meant leaving everything else too. My family sided with him, said I was overreacting. I'm sorry, Bob said, and he sounded like he meant it. I work 3 jobs to keep us afloat, Maggie continued, surprising herself with her honesty. House cleaning in the morning, data entry in the afternoon, and stock clerk at night. I leave Lily with Mrs. Patterson when I can afford it. But lately there's no money for babysitting, Bob finished. Maggie nodded, embarrassed by the admission. I do my best, but sometimes my best isn't enough, when she's hungry and I'm not there. Her voice broke. Mama, Lily said, appearing suddenly at Maggie's side. Don't cry. Mr. Bob, tell my mama why you need me to help you walk. Bob looked uncomfortable. Lily, I don't actually think you can. Yes, I can, Lily said with absolute certainty. But first you have to understand why you need to walk. It's not about you, Mr. Bob. It's about her. She pointed at Maggie. What do you mean? Bob asked. Mama works so hard, but she's still sad and scared all the time. She thinks she has to do everything by herself, but you have money and a big house, and you're sad too. You both need each other. The simple truth of it hit both adults like a physical blow. Here was this 6-year-old child seeing connections and solutions that had never occurred to either of them. Lily, Maggie said carefully, it's not that simple. Why not? Lily asked. Mr. Bob is lonely and we need help. He has everything except someone to care about. And we care about everyone, but don't have anything. It's like puzzle pieces. Bob stared at Lily, then at Maggie. What if she's right? Right about what? What if this isn't about walking at all? What if it's about connection? Bob turned to Maggie. I have resources I don't use, space I don't need, time I don't value. And you have something I've forgotten I needed. Which is purpose, Bob said quietly. A reason to be better than I am. Maggie felt something shift in her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. You don't know us. We're strangers. So were you and James when you met, Bob pointed out. Sometimes strangers become family. Sometimes strangers break your heart, Maggie countered. Lily climbed onto Bob's lap with the casual intimacy of a child who'd decided someone was safe. Mr. Bob won't break our hearts, Mama. He's been hurt too much to hurt other people on purpose. Bob's arms closed around the little girl instinctively, and Maggie saw tears in his eyes. When was the last time someone had chosen to trust him so completely? What are you proposing? Maggie asked quietly. I don't know yet, Bob admitted, but I'd like to find out. Would you be willing to have dinner here tomorrow? All of us together? Maggie looked at her daughter, secure and happy in this stranger's arms, and made a decision that terrified her. Okay, she said. One dinner. The next evening, Maggie stood outside Harrison Manor, wearing her only good dress and fighting the urge to run. She'd spent the day questioning her sanity. What was she doing, bringing her daughter to a stranger's house for dinner? But when Bob opened the door, his face lit up in a way that made her chest tight. When was the last time someone had been genuinely happy to see her? You came, he said, as if he'd been afraid they wouldn't. Lily wouldn't let me change my mind, Maggie admitted. The dining room had been transformed. Instead of the formal table for 20, Bob had set up a small round table by the window. Candles flickered softly, and the good china had been replaced with colorful plates that looked child-friendly. This is beautiful, Maggie said, touched despite herself. I wanted it to feel like home, Bob said. I realize I don't actually know what that feels like anymore. Dinner was surprisingly easy. Bob had ordered from an Italian restaurant downtown, and the food was better than anything Maggie had tasted in years. But more than that, the conversation flowed naturally. Bob asked about Lily's favorite subjects in school, about Maggie's work, about their dreams and fears. What did you want to be when you grew up? Bob asked Lily over dessert. A doctor, Lily said without hesitation, so I can help people feel better, like I'm going to help you. Lily, Maggie said gently, we talked about this. Mr. Harrison has been to lots of doctors, but they were trying to fix his legs, Lily said. I'm not going to fix his legs. I'm going to fix his heart. The words fell into silence. Bob's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, and Maggie saw the exact moment when Lily's meaning hit him. My heart is fine, Bob said quietly. No, it's not, Lily said matter-of-factly. It's all closed up and hard. That's why your legs don't work. Your heart forgot how to send love down to your feet. That's not how bodies work, baby, Maggie said. Maybe it's how some bodies work, Bob said thoughtfully. Maybe when you stop caring about everything, you stop feeling everything. Lily nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. So if we can make your heart open again, maybe your legs will remember how to feel. It was ridiculous. It was impossible. It went against everything medical science understood about spinal cord injuries. But as Bob looked at this tiny girl who believed in miracles, something inside his chest did feel different, warmer, more alive. How would we do that? He asked seriously. Easy, Lily said. You start caring about people again, and people start caring about you. That's how hearts remember how to work. She looked between Bob and Maggie with the wisdom of someone much older. You two are already starting to care about each other, I can tell. Maggie felt heat rise in her cheeks. Was it that obvious? Lily, she started. It's okay, Mama. It's good to care about people. It means your heart is working right. Bob reached across the table and touched Maggie's hand gently. She's not wrong, he said quietly. I do care. About both of you, more than I've cared about anything in years. The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and precious and terrifying. What happens now? Maggie whispered. Before Bob could answer, Lily stood up on her chair and placed her small hands on both their heads, like a tiny priestess performing a blessing. Now the real magic starts, she said solemnly, because when hearts connect, anything is possible. And in that moment, with candlelight dancing on the walls and this impossible child's hands warm on their heads, both adults almost believed her. 3 days later, Maggie received the call she'd been dreading. The landlord was evicting them. 2 months behind on rent, no more extensions, out by the end of the week. She sat on her bed holding the notice, tears streaming down her face. She'd tried so hard, worked so many hours, sacrificed so much, and it still wasn't enough. A knock at the door made her quickly wipe her eyes. It was probably Mrs. Patterson coming to check on them. The elderly woman had been like a grandmother to Lily, one of the few bright spots in their difficult life. But when she opened the door, Bob was there in his wheelchair, concern etched on his face. I saw you crying through the window, he said simply. What's wrong? For a moment, Maggie's pride warred with her desperation. She'd been taking care of herself and Lily for years. She didn't need anyone's help, but looking at Bob's genuine concern, the last of her defenses crumbled. We're being evicted, she said, her voice breaking. I'm 3 jobs, and it's still not enough. I don't know what to do anymore. Bob was quiet for a long moment. How much do you owe? It doesn't matter. I can't keep borrowing money I can't pay back. And even if I could make the rent this month, what about next month and the month after that? What if you didn't have to pay rent anymore? Maggie stared at him. What do you mean? Move in with me. The words fell between them like stones into still water. Maggie's first instinct was to say no, to run, to protect herself and Lily from the disappointment that would inevitably come. You don't know what you're saying, she said. I know exactly what I'm saying. That house has 37 rooms, and I use maybe 5 of them. There's a guest suite on the ground floor with its own entrance, its own kitchen. You and Lily could have your own space, your own privacy. I can't afford... You wouldn't pay rent. You'd be helping me. How would I be helping you? Bob's voice got very quiet. By giving me a reason to get up in the morning, by letting me be part of something good, by allowing me to care about someone again. And from inside the apartment, Lily's voice called out, Mama, is Mr. Bob here? A moment later, she appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up when she saw Bob. Are you here for your heart medicine? She asked seriously. My what? Bob asked, confused. Your heart medicine. That's what happens when people care about each other. It's like medicine for broken hearts. Maggie looked down at her daughter, then back at Bob. Could it really be that simple? "What would people think?" she asked. "A single mother moving in with a wealthy man." "Let them think what they want," Bob said firmly. "The people who matter will understand, and the people who don't understand don't matter." "Mama," Lily said, tugging on her shirt, "remember what you always tell me? Sometimes when you're drowning, you have to let someone throw you a rope." Maggie had said those words to Lily just last week, when her daughter was struggling with asking for help at school. Now her own advice was coming back to her. "Is this a rope?" she asked Bob quietly. "It's whatever you need it to be," Bob replied. "A fresh start, a safe place, a chance for all of us to be better than we are alone." Maggie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she saw Bob watching her with hopeful anxiety, and Lily watching them both with the serene confidence of someone who'd known all along how this would end. "Okay," she said finally, "but we have rules." "Name them." "Lily and I pay our own way somehow. We're not charity cases." "Agreed. You can help manage the house, coordinate with staff, handle things I can't do from this chair. And then if it doesn't work out, then we figure out how to make it work out," Bob said firmly. "Because some things are worth fighting for." Lily clapped her hands together. "I told you the magic was starting." As Maggie began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd all found something worth believing in. She couldn't help but think that her 6-year-old daughter might be the wisest person she'd ever met. After all, who said miracles had to be impossible? 2 weeks into January, their new life at Harrison Manor had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Maggie woke each morning in the guest suite that felt like a palace compared to their old apartment, and found herself actually looking forward to the day ahead. Bob had been true to his word about her paying her own way. She'd taken over managing the household staff, coordinating maintenance, and handling correspondence that had piled up for months. For the first time in years, she felt capable and valued rather than just desperate. Lily had transformed the mansion into her personal playground. She'd befriended Mrs. Chen, learned the names of every delivery person, and somehow convinced the groundskeeper to let her help plant flowers in the greenhouse. But most importantly, she'd appointed herself Bob's official heart doctor. "Time for your treatment, Mr. Bob," Lily announced, appearing in his study with a serious expression. "What's today's prescription, Dr. Lily?" Bob asked, playing along. "Today we practice feeling grateful. Mrs. Chen made cookies and they smell like happiness. You have to eat one and think of 3 good things." It had become their daily ritual. Lily would prescribe emotions like medicine: gratitude, joy, hope, compassion. At first, Bob had humored her because she was adorable, but gradually, he'd realized something extraordinary was happening. For 20 years, he'd felt nothing but anger and emptiness. Now, sitting in his sunlit study with cookie crumbs on his shirt and Lily's laughter echoing through the halls, he felt content. When was the last time he'd been content? "My 3 good things," Bob said seriously. 1. Mrs. Chen's cookies really do smell like happiness. 2. Your mother smiled at breakfast this morning, and it wasn't a worried smile. 3. I slept through the night without the usual nightmares. "See," Lily said triumphantly, "your heart is getting stronger every day." That afternoon, Bob was reviewing financial documents when he felt something strange, a tingling sensation in his right leg, faint but unmistakable. He sat perfectly still, afraid to breathe, afraid to hope. There it was again, the slightest flutter of sensation, like a whisper of feeling returning to a place that had been silent for 2 decades. "Maggie," he called, his voice shaking slightly. She appeared in the doorway, concern on her face. "What's wrong?" "I felt something in my leg. Just for a second, but I felt it." Maggie's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I think so. He paused, not wanting to say the words out loud and make them real. What if Lily is right? What if this isn't about medical impossibility? What if it's about something else entirely? Before Maggie could answer, Lily burst into the room, her cheeks flushed from playing outside. "Mr. Bob, I saw you from the window. You look different, like you were glowing or something." Bob and Maggie exchanged glances. Had the child somehow sensed what had happened? "I felt something, Lily," Bob said carefully, "in my leg, just like you said might happen." Lily's face broke into the brightest smile either adult had ever seen. I told you your heart was getting better." She threw her arms around Bob's neck, and in that moment of pure joy and connection, Bob felt it again, stronger this time, a definite sensation of warmth spreading down his right leg. "It's happening," he whispered. "It's actually happening." But even as hope bloomed in his chest, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered, what would happen when the outside world discovered their unconventional family? And would these fragile new feelings survive the scrutiny that was sure to come? Dr. Patricia Winters had been Bob's neurologist for 15 years. At 64, she'd seen every type of spinal cord injury and every false hope that came with them. So when Bob called requesting an emergency appointment, claiming he'd regained some sensation, she prepared herself for another difficult conversation about acceptance and adaptation. But the man who wheeled into her office was not the bitter, closed-off patient she'd known for years. This Bob Harrison sat straighter, spoke with animation, and had something she'd never seen in him before: genuine happiness. "Tell me exactly what you've been experiencing," Dr. Winters said, pulling up his MRI scans on her computer. "It started 3 days ago, a tingling sensation in my right leg, just above the knee. Yesterday I felt warmth spreading down to my ankle, and this morning—" Bob paused, as if afraid to voice what came next. "This morning I moved my toe." Dr. Winters tried to hide her skepticism. "You moved your toe?" "Just the smallest movement, but Maggie saw it too. And Lily said she could see the energy flowing down my leg." "Who are Maggie and Lily?" Bob's face lit up. "Maggie Thompson and her 6-year-old daughter. They've been living with me for the past month. Maggie manages my household and well, Lily believes she can cure me." Several alarm bells went off in Dr. Winters' mind. A vulnerable patient, a woman and child who'd moved into his home, claims of miraculous healing. She'd seen this pattern before, and it never ended well. "Bob, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has anyone been encouraging you to change your medical treatment, suggesting alternative therapies, asking you to sign any financial documents?" Bob's expression hardened. "You think they're taking advantage of me? I think you're experiencing something wonderful, hope, and I want to make sure it's not being manipulated. Dr. Winters, I've been dead inside for 20 years. These past few weeks, I've remembered what it feels like to be alive. If that's being manipulated, then I'm grateful for it." The examination that followed was thorough and professional. Dr. Winters tested reflexes, checked for sensation, observed carefully as Bob attempted to move his toes. To her surprise, there were subtle changes, not dramatic, not miraculous, but definite improvements in muscle response and sensory function. "There's definitely something happening," she admitted finally. "I can't explain it medically, but there are measurable changes in your neurological responses." "So you believe me?" "I believe what I can measure. But Bob, I need you to be realistic. Even if you're experiencing some return of sensation, complete recovery from your type of injury is impossible," Bob finished. "I know what the textbooks say, but maybe textbooks don't account for everything." Dr. Winters looked at her patient, really looked at him, and saw something that made her pause. In 15 years, she'd watched Bob spiral deeper into depression and isolation. Now he radiated vitality and purpose. As a doctor, she couldn't explain what was happening to him physically, but as a human being, she could see that something profound had healed in his spirit. "I'd like to meet them," she said finally. "This Maggie and Lily, if they're part of whatever is helping you heal, I think they should be part of your medical team." Bob smiled. "Lily will love that. She's been saying all along that doctors and magic work better together." That evening, Bob shared the doctor's findings with Maggie and Lily over dinner. The little girl listened seriously, nodding as if everything made perfect sense. "Dr. Winters wants to meet you," Bob told her. "Good. Lily said matter-of-factly. She needs to understand that some healing comes from machines and medicine, and some healing comes from love, but the best healing comes from both. Maggie reached across the table and squeezed Bob's hand. Whatever's happening to you, I'm proud of how brave you're being. I'm not brave, Bob said. I'm terrified. What if this is all in my head? What if I'm imagining everything? Then we'll deal with it together, Maggie said firmly. Whatever comes next, you're not facing it alone anymore. But even as they celebrated this small victory, none of them noticed the figure watching from the street outside. Someone who'd been asking questions about the wealthy man and the mysterious woman and child who'd moved into his home. Someone who was very interested in Bob Harrison's sudden change in circumstances. Eleanor Harrison arrived at her son's mansion unannounced on a cold February morning, her 78-year-old face set in lines of disapproval. She'd been hearing rumors from friends in their social circle, whispers about Bob's new situation, and she'd come to see for herself what was happening to her only child. Maggie answered the door, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been teaching Lily how to make pancakes in the mansion's enormous kitchen. "I'm Eleanor Harrison," the older woman said coolly. "Robert's mother. And you are?" "Maggie Thompson. Please come in." Bob's in the greenhouse with Lily. Eleanor's sharp eyes took in everything as they walked through the house. She noticed the child's drawings on the refrigerator, the comfortable lived-in feeling that had replaced the sterile emptiness she remembered, the sound of laughter coming from somewhere deeper in the house. They found Bob in the greenhouse, sitting in his wheelchair beside a small raised garden bed. Lily knelt in the dirt beside him, her hands covered in soil as she carefully transplanted seedlings. "These are going to be the most beautiful flowers," Lily was saying seriously, "because we're planting them with love and hope and all the good feelings that make things grow." Bob looked up and saw his mother standing in the doorway. For a moment, his face fell back into the old guarded expression Eleanor remembered. Then Lily noticed the visitor and scrambled to her feet. "You must be Mr. Bob's mama," she said brightly, apparently oblivious to the tension in the air. "I'm Lily. I'm 6 years old, and I'm helping Mr. Bob remember how to be happy." Eleanor stared down at this tiny, dirt-covered child who spoke with such casual confidence about her son's emotional state. "Hello, Lily," she said carefully. "I'm Mrs. Harrison. You can call me Grandma Eleanor if you want," Lily said cheerfully. "That's what I call my mama's mama, but she lives far away. It would be nice to have a grandma close by." The simple offer hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She'd resigned herself to never having grandchildren, never experiencing that particular joy. And here was this child, offering it freely with no conditions attached. "Lily, honey, let Mrs. Harrison and Bob talk privately," Maggie said gently, sensing the undercurrents. "But they're family," Lily protested. "Families should talk together." "It's all right," Eleanor said, surprising herself. "She can stay." For the next hour, Eleanor watched her son interact with Lily and Maggie. She saw him laugh at Lily's jokes, listen seriously to her theories about plant communication, and look at Maggie with an expression Eleanor hadn't seen since he was a teenager. When Lily excused herself to wash her hands, Eleanor finally spoke to Bob directly. "You look different," she said. "I feel different. The Hendersons are saying you're being taken advantage of, that this woman moved in with her child and is after your money." Bob's jaw tightened. "And what do you think?" Eleanor looked toward the kitchen, where she could hear Maggie helping Lily clean up. "I think you've been dead behind the eyes for 20 years, and today you look alive. I don't care what the Hendersons think." The simple statement of support brought tears to Bob's eyes. "Mother, something extraordinary is happening. I'm starting to feel sensation in my legs. Dr. Winters confirmed it." "That's wonderful. And I'm falling in love," Bob said quietly. "With Maggie, with Lily, with the life we're building together. For the first time since the accident, I have reasons to hope for the future." Eleanor studied her son's face. She'd spent 20 years watching him retreat from life, pushing away everyone who tried to help. Now here he was, vulnerable and open, and more like his old self than she dared hope. "What do you need from me?" she asked simply. "Your blessing, your support, and maybe your help dealing with people who want to see this fail." Lily reappeared then, clean-handed and carrying a small potted plant. "This is for you, Grandma Eleanor," she said, offering the tiny flower. "I grew it myself from a seed. Mama says when you give someone a plant, you're giving them hope." Eleanor took the small pot with hands that trembled slightly. "Thank you, dear one. I'll take very good care of it." As Eleanor prepared to leave, she pulled Maggie aside. "I don't know you," she said quietly, "but I know my son. If you're genuine in your care for him, you have my support. If you're not—" She let the threat hang unfinished. "I love him," Maggie said simply, "and I love the man he's becoming. I would never hurt him." "Good," Eleanor said, "because if Robert is truly healing, he's going to need all of us to protect what you've built here." But even as Bob's mother drove away feeling hopeful for the first time in years, she didn't notice the private investigator's car following at a distance. Someone else was very interested in the Harrison family's new dynamic, and their intentions were far from protective. The first lawsuit arrived on a grey March morning, delivered by a serious-faced man in an expensive suit. Maggie signed for the thick envelope with shaking hands, her heart sinking as she read the return address. Whitmore, Sterling and Associates, the law firm that represented Bob's ex-wife, Catherine. "Bob," she called, her voice tight with dread. "You need to see this." Bob read the documents in silence, his face growing paler with each page. Catherine was suing for half of his assets, claiming that his diminished mental capacity due to manipulation by opportunistic individuals had invalidated their original divorce settlement. "She's saying I'm incompetent," Bob said finally, "that you've somehow brainwashed me into changing my will and giving you access to my finances." Have you changed your will?" Maggie asked. "Yes. I named you and Lily as beneficiaries, but only after getting a complete psychological evaluation to prove I was of sound mind." Bob's hands clenched on the papers. "Catherine hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Why is she doing this now?" The answer came with the second delivery of the day, a tabloid newspaper with their photo on the front page. Someone had taken pictures of them in the greenhouse, of Lily on Bob's lap, of Maggie kissing his cheek. The headline screamed, "Gold Digger and Child Con Millionaire into Miracle Cure Scam." Lily found them reading the article together, their faces grim. "Why do you look sad?" she asked, climbing onto Bob's lap with her usual fearless affection. "Some people are saying untrue things about us," Maggie explained carefully. "They think Mama and I are trying to trick you for your money." Lily considered this seriously. "But that's silly. You can't trick someone into having feelings. Love isn't something you can steal." "Tell that to the lawyers," Bob said bitterly. That afternoon brought more bad news. Dr. Sarah Chen, a court-appointed psychiatrist, arrived to evaluate Bob's mental state. For 3 hours, she questioned him about his relationship with Maggie and Lily, his decision-making process, his medical claims. "Mr. Harrison," Dr. Chen said finally, "you understand that your ex-wife's legal team is claiming you're suffering from a form of Stockholm Syndrome, that your isolation and disability made you vulnerable to emotional manipulation." "And what do you think?" Bob asked. "I think you're a man who was clinically depressed for 20 years and has recently found reasons to engage with life again. Whether that engagement is healthy or pathological depends on the motivations of the people around you." That evening, the 3 of them sat in Bob's study, the legal document spread across his desk like a declaration of war. "Maybe we should go," Maggie said quietly. "If our being here is causing you legal trouble, financial problems." "No," Bob said firmly. "I won't let them scare us apart." "But what if they're right?" Maggie's voice broke. "What if I am taking advantage of you? What if I'm so desperate for security that I've convinced myself this is love?" Bob wheeled his chair closer to her. "Look at me, Maggie. Really look at me. Do I seem like a man who's being taken advantage of?" Maggie looked at him and saw strength she'd never noticed before, purpose, determination. The man who'd been broken for 20 years was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly what he wanted and was willing to fight for it. "You seem like a man who's found his way home," she said softly. "Then that's all that matters. Let them challenge us. Let them question us. We know the truth." Lily, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "The magic is working too well." Both adults turned to look at her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Maggie asked. "When something really good starts happening, sometimes really bad people try to stop it, but they can't, because love is stronger than being mean. Mr. Bob's heart is almost all the way better now. That's why his legs are getting better too." As if to prove her point, Bob felt the familiar tingling in his legs, stronger now than it had ever been. He looked down and concentrated, and to his amazement, his right foot moved visibly inside his shoe. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Maggie nodded, tears in her eyes. "I saw it." Whatever happens with the lawyers and the newspapers and all the people who want to tear us apart," Bob said, "we have something they can't touch. We have each other, and we have hope, and we have love." But even as they held each other close, none of them knew that the biggest challenge to their fragile happiness was still to come. Tomorrow would bring a revelation that would test everything they thought they knew about miracles, healing, and the power of love to truly change the impossible. The call came at 6 in the morning, jolting Bob from the deepest sleep he'd had in years. Dr. Winter's voice was tense with urgency. "Bob, I need you to come to the hospital immediately. I've been reviewing your latest scans with a colleague, and we've found something extraordinary." 2 hours later, Bob sat in Dr. Winter's office, staring at images of his spine that he'd seen hundreds of times before. But these scans were different. Where there had once been a complete severation of nerve pathways, new connections appeared to be forming. "This is impossible," Dr. Winter said, pointing to the screen. "According to everything we know about spinal cord injuries, this level of regeneration simply doesn't happen in humans." "But it is happening," Bob said. "Yes, it is. And I need to understand why. Bob, I have to ask, have you been taking any experimental medications, participating in any clinical trials, undergone any procedures you haven't told me about?" "Nothing. The only thing that's changed in my life is Maggie and Lily." Dr. Winters leaned back in her chair. "I've been a neurologist for 30 years. I don't believe in miracles, but I also don't believe in denying evidence." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever is happening to you is real, measurable, and unprecedented. Your nerve pathways are regenerating at a rate that should be medically impossible. If this continues—" She paused, as if afraid to voice the possibility. "If this continues, what? You might walk again, not might, you probably will walk again." The words hit Bob like a lightning bolt. For 20 years he'd been told his condition was permanent, irreversible, hopeless. Now this woman who delivered that devastating news was telling him the opposite. "How long?" he asked. "If the regeneration continues at this rate, 6 months, maybe less." Bob drove home in a daze, his mind reeling with possibilities and fears. Walking again had been a dream for so long that actually facing it felt surreal. But more than that, he was terrified of what it might mean for his relationship with Maggie and Lily. What if they'd only loved him because he needed them? What if his helplessness had been the foundation of their connection? Would they still want him when he was no longer broken? He found them in the garden, Lily teaching Maggie the proper way to plant flower bulbs according to her 6-year-old expertise. They looked up as he approached, and immediately sensed something had changed. "What did the doctor say?" Maggie asked. Bob told them everything: the scans, the regeneration, Dr. Winter's prognosis. When he finished, Lily clapped her hands together in delight, but Maggie's expression was unreadable. "That's wonderful," she said carefully. "Everything you've hoped for." But Bob heard the uncertainty in her voice, the same fear that was eating at him. "Maggie, if I walk again, if I don't need help anymore—" "You think we'll leave?" she interrupted. "I think you came into my life because I was broken. If I'm not broken anymore—" Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up. her hands still dirty from gardening, and looked him directly in the eyes. "You think I fell in love with your wheelchair?" she asked. "I think you fell in love with someone who needed you desperately, someone who couldn't survive without you." "You're right," Maggie said, and Bob's heart sank. "I did fall in love with someone who needed me. But not because you couldn't walk, Bob. I fell in love with someone whose heart was broken, who'd forgotten how to trust, who'd given up on happiness. And I watched that man remember how to hope again." Lily, who'd been listening to this exchange with the serious attention children gave to important adult conversations, suddenly stood up. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. Both adults nodded. "I always knew you were going to walk again, Mr. Bob. That was never the real magic." "What was the real magic?" Bob asked. Lily smiled, the wise smile of someone much older than 6. "The real magic was watching you remember that you deserved to be loved. Your legs getting better is just a bonus." Bob felt tears streaming down his face. For 20 years he'd believed his worth was tied to his ability to walk, to be independent, to not need anyone. But sitting in this garden with dirt under his fingernails and love in his heart, he realized he'd been wrong about everything. "So when I can walk again," he said slowly, "will you still love me?" "We'll love you more," Maggie said firmly, "because you'll be complete, all of you. The man who overcame impossible odds, who learned to trust again, who chose love over fear." That night, as they tucked Lily into bed, she made an announcement that stopped them both in their tracks. "Tomorrow is when the biggest magic happens," she said, matter-of-factly. "What do you mean?" Maggie asked. "Tomorrow, Mr. Bob is going to take his first step, and then everyone will see that the little girl who believed in miracles was right all along." Oh, as they kissed her goodnight and turned off the lights, neither Bob nor Maggie questioned how Lily could know such a thing. They'd learned to trust this extraordinary child's insights about matters of the heart and spirit. But tomorrow would prove that Lily's gift for seeing the impossible extended far beyond emotional healing. Tomorrow would change everything they thought they knew about the power of love, faith, and one little girl's absolute belief in miracles. The morning of March 15th dawned bright and clear, with spring sunlight streaming through the mansion's tall windows. Bob woke feeling different, energized in a way he hadn't experienced since before his accident. The tingling in his legs had grown stronger throughout the night, and now it felt like electricity coursing through pathways that had been dark for 20 years. Maggie found him in the kitchen, sitting straighter in his wheelchair than she'd ever seen him. "Today feels different," he said simply. Before she could respond, Lily burst through the door, still in her pajamas but wide awake and practically vibrating with excitement. "It's today," she announced, "the day Mr. Bob remembers how to walk." "Sweetheart, we don't know," Maggie began. "I know," Lily said with absolute certainty. "I dreamed about it. In my dream, there was this bright golden light around Mr. Bob's heart, and it went all the way down to his toes, and then he stood up, and the light got so bright that everyone could see it. Bob looked at this remarkable child who'd changed his life so completely. Lily, even if my legs are getting better, learning to walk again will take months of physical therapy. I might be able to stand, but try," Lily said simply. "Right now, just try." Bob felt his heart racing. For 20 years he'd been terrified of hoping too much, of believing too strongly in possibilities that might not exist. But looking at Lily's expectant face and Maggie's loving support, he realized that fear had no place in this moment. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. The sensation in his legs was stronger than ever, a warm tingling that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. "I can feel them," he whispered. "My legs. I can actually feel them." He began to push himself up, and for the first time in 20 years, his legs responded. Not perfectly, not strongly, but they moved. They supported him. They remembered. Inch by inch, Bob rose from his wheelchair. Maggie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily watched with calm satisfaction, as if she'd been expecting this moment all along. "You're standing," Maggie breathed. "You're actually standing." Bob was upright now, wobbling slightly but definitely vertical. Tears streamed down his face as sensation flooded through his legs. Not just tingling now, but real feeling, real strength. "Now try a step," Lily said encouragingly. "Just one little step toward me." Bob looked at the 3 feet of space between them. It might as well have been 3 miles. But Lily held out her small hands, her face radiant with faith and love. "Come on, Mr. Bob, I'm right here." Bob lifted his right foot, actually lifted it, and took a step, then another. His movements were shaky, uncertain, but he was walking. After 20 years in a wheelchair, he was walking across his kitchen toward a little girl who'd never doubted this moment would come. When he reached Lily, he dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms, both of them crying now. "You did it," she whispered into his ear. "You remembered how to walk." "No, we did it," Bob corrected. "All of us together." That afternoon, Dr. Winters arrived with a team of specialists to document what she was already calling the most remarkable case of spinal cord regeneration in medical history. They ran tests, took measurements, performed examinations that confirmed what everyone had witnessed. Bob Harrison was walking again. "I'll be studying this case for the rest of my career," Dr. Winters told them, "and I'll probably never fully understand how it happened." "Does it matter how it happened?" Bob asked. "Isn't it enough that it did?" "Doctor." Winters looked at this family, because that's what they were now, clearly and undeniably, and smiled. "You're right. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be celebrated." That evening, as they sat together in the garden where so much of their healing had taken place, Lily made one final pronouncement. "The magic isn't finished yet," she said. "What do you mean?" Maggie asked. "Mr. Bob learned to walk again, but that was just the practice magic. Now comes the real magic." "Which is?" Lily grinned. "Now you two get married, and I get to be the flower girl, and we all live happily ever after like in the fairy tales. Except this fairy tale is real, and it's ours." Bob and Maggie looked at each other, and in that moment they both realized that a 6-year-old child had just articulated what they'd both been afraid to hope for. "Is that what you want?" Bob asked Maggie quietly. "It's what I've wanted since the day we met," she replied. "I just didn't dare believe it was possible." "Well," Bob said, reaching for both of their hands, "we've already proven that impossible things happen when people love each other enough to believe." 6 months later, Bob Harrison walked down the aisle of St. Mary's Church to marry Margaret Thompson, with Lily as their flower girl, Eleanor as the proud grandmother, and Dr. Winters as a witness to miracles. The society pages called it the wedding of the year, but for the 3 people at the center of it all, it was simply the next chapter in a story that had taught them that love really could heal anything, even the things that medical science said were impossible. And in the front row, holding her carefully tended flower from Lily, sat Eleanor Harrison, wiping tears of joy from her eyes as she watched her son step confidently into a future that a little girl's faith had made possible. The miracle wasn't just that Bob learned to walk again. The miracle was that 3 broken souls found each other and became whole. And sometimes when love is strong enough and faith is pure enough, even the impossible becomes inevitable.